This is the Other 22 Hours podcast.
Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of the Other 22 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Shafer-Haiss.
And I'm your other host, Michaela Anne, and we are in our second year of the podcast. So glad to still be here and so thankful you are here listening.
Real quick, before we jump into today's episode, we have a few gentle asks for you guys. One is we have started a Patreon community. So if you'd like to support this podcast directly and help us cover the expenses of producing even a small show like ours, we have that below in the show notes and has all the normal Patreon things, a little bit of community, and it's growing all the time. So if you're interested, just take a quick click below. Secondly would be to please subscribe or follow on whatever platform you listen on. It does just the little tiniest bit with the meager algorithm of podcasts to open our show to new audiences. And the more people we get to listen, the more guests we have, and the more ideas we can share back with you guys. So with that, chances are you found out about this show outside of the algorithm. And however you found out about this show, you could just take a second to share your favorite episode in that same way. Post it to social media, throw it on in the van, whatever you could. I'm sure there is a friend of yours that doesn't know what we do. They could really benefit from these conversations, and we'd love to meet them.
Yeah, and one of the things we really pride ourselves on in this podcast is that we are not music journalists. We are musicians ourselves. So we don't think of this as an interview per se, but rather a conversation. We're not promoting anything. We are attempting to pull the curtain back a little bit and have honest, vulnerable conversations about the realities of what it is to build a lifelong career around your art.
And what that is to live in a constant state of things being outside of our control. And so we like to focus our conversations on what is within our control, being our mindsets, our tools, our routines, habits, whatever it might be, with the question, what do you do to create sustainability in your life so that you can sustain your creativity? And today we got to have that conversation with our longtime friend, Lilly Hiatt.
Lilly Hiatt is an incredible musician and singer-songwriter. We've known her for about a decade here in Nashville, and she has had such an interesting career and journey. She also is the daughter of the renowned singer-songwriter John Hiatt, so she has such a unique perspective growing up, witnessing someone build a career in a very different time, mind you. But she's put out many records over the last several years with indie label deals on her own, made records with Michael Trent from Shovels and Rope. She's toured with Aaron Shafer-Haiss, John Moreland, Drive-By Truckers, Margot Price.
Yeah, we get into a lot of really wholesome things, it feels, with Lilly. We maybe talk about the pandemic more in this episode than we have in the previous 69 episodes, and in a great way, and with a lot of sense of gratitude, a lot of sense of using hardship and struggle and like difficult times, accepting them and growing from them, which if you've listened to this podcast before, you know I love talking about that. And apparently Lilly does too. And so that's a theme that runs out through this whole thing. Lilly deleted her Instagram account at over 20,000 followers, was off Instagram for a year, and started a brand new one and loved it. And so she talks about the decision-making process behind that, the experience of that, promoting tours without that massive tool. We get into a whole bunch of things with the general underpinning of focusing on quality over quantity. So with that, here's our conversation with Lilly Hiatt.
Thank you for being here. And
of course,
just to start off, like, where are you today? Are you home in Nashville? And what's kind of going on in life right now for you?
I'm home in Goodlettsville, where I live with my husband and my dog. They just took an errand to take recycling. They might be back soon, so you might see a dog running around. He really loves to have my attention, and my husband's. But anyway, but he's a good dog, so doing that like everyone else, just managing various things, have some musical things, have some work stuff, and just trying to keep on top of it and not drop the ball any one place. So that's where I'm at. But overall, things have been cool.
Have you been in Goodlettsville for a while?
We just moved here about a year ago. We bought our first house out here last August, so we're still kind of new to it. Where are y'all located?
Pretty much exact opposite of you. Percy Priest is like a half mile away.
That's a nice area. We looked at houses around there. There are a lot of really cool neighborhoods surrounding Nashville or outside of the central part of it.
We bought in a hurry. We were renting and we were on tour in California. The landlord's like, I'm going to move back into the house. And we're like, oh no. And I was like trying to call him like, man, like we'll buy the house from you, name a price, like and he just wouldn't respond. And so we had like basically one day to look at houses, and we looked at like 12 houses and saw this one and put in an offer, and they accepted it like immediately. And we're like, cool, where are we moving?
You're like, what house is it?
Yeah, we just knew that it was close to the lake. We're like, great, the lake is like right there. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's
and we were
awesome.
definitely like, we've been here now 8 years, and we're like, you know,
cool.
we would definitely do things a little differently next time around, but we're also super lucky we got in the housing market at all. So
That's awesome. And sometimes that's just the best way to do things, just jumping in. But one day, that's impressive that y'all made that happen.
Yeah.
Because it took us a few months. And I felt like that was quick, you know? I was like, wow, we did it. But one day, dang.
Impressive is such a sunny way to look at it.
yeah.
Like short-sighted, impulsive.
I try my best to look at stuff that way because I feel like that's how I operate best, is when it's just like, oh shit, like you've got to figure this out now. And then it's like, you just do. But then sometimes I'm like, is that the best? Like, is that when I do my best? But I've never found a house in one day. I would say that's something to feel very good about. There's a lot of rejection involved in the housing market.
I kind of hate the whole like everything happens for a reason mentality, but at the same time, my mom had a massive stroke 3 years ago, and so her circumstances are very difficult, and she is constantly like, what is meant to be, and everything happens for a reason. And I'm always like, Mom, that annoys me. She's like,
you're like, Mom.
But she's like, from a spiritual perspective, I have to believe that if I go down that route, I'm like, we are where we are because we're meant to be. And if we don't love our circumstances, if I believe that, how do I look around and think about like, why am I meant to be here right now? What could I be learning from this rather than just digging my heels in to be miserable, which I also like to do a lot.
Oh, totally.
So that challenge, I think, is helpful of like, for some reason, we were meant to buy this house in this neighborhood because it happened so quick and easy. Mm-hmm. And what are the lessons to learn from all of this?
Totally. No, I hear you. And yeah, I think that's a good way to look at things. And that's cool that that's the stance your mom takes. Because when I see somebody that's gone through like a massive life change like that, believing that way, I'm like, there's a lot to be said for that mentality, you know?
Yeah.
So good for her for like finding that. I hope she's doing okay.
Thank you. She is. She keeps getting better. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It's the being forced to look at what you can control.
Totally.
You know? Well, I can't control like my mindset, my viewpoint, and you got to make hay while the sun shines, basically.
Absolutely. It is so true. And kind of a liberating realization to like a mental spiral. It's like, oh, wait, what can I like do right now? Even I feel like the simplest things that like can be controlled, for me, they alleviate this tension or something of the whole thing, whatever the whole thing is. Like anybody, I worry all the time. I think a lot of us do, you know? It's like, how do you be an adult and not worry all the time? You know, there are a lot of very real things in life, but yeah, the control thing is huge.
Do you have things, whether it's like habits or tools or anything that you've found that help with your worrying? Definitely being self-employed, there's a ton of things to worry about in that in itself.
There totally are. I've sought help from so many people, including working in situations where it's not, you know, my thing. I'm always going to have my thing in my business and give my all to it, but I also like to be there for others, and whatever that means, whether it's a job or assisting my family. It's funny because when I'm freaking out, it's not in my nature to be like, I know, go help other people. I'm like, no, I'm going to sit in this and obsess over it. But I'm slowly finding, because I'm slow to find out a lot of times about simple, you know what I mean? Where you're like, what am I doing? But it's simple as like getting out of my space and into a communal space or like anything. That's one way, but that takes more effort. A simple way when I'm alone is like lifting weights or doing crunches, or I read a lot, various things like little meditations and movement. Movement is huge for me, like a hike, exercise. My whole mind will change where I'm like, oh, I see it different. But I have to force myself to do that rather than sit and drink coffee. I want to just pour other things on top of the anxiety that make it worse. Why is that an inclination? I want to like do all the wrong things.
Yeah.
I can sympathize with that and relate to that. If I'm feeling down, I'm like, I'll just drink more coffee because that'll get me. That'll work. I'll just push my way through this, you know?
Right.
Or, well, I have a bunch of work I need to do. I'll just go and do that and that'll distract me. And it never really does.
I think sometimes there's like this idea, what I've started to pinpoint is that I'll start to feel anxious and worry and I'll have like a physical response. And then my mind will be like, what's making you anxious? Let's start searching for evidence of like why I'm right to be anxious and worried.
Oh, yeah.
And that
I get
feeds
that.
it.
I do that too. I let it snowball. I feel very fortunate to have a partner that can tell me, for anybody, like a good friend, any person you trust that can be like, you're doing that thing. This is not real. Because I do that too, Michaela. I'm like, I'm going to investigate until this blows into something huge.
What I observe of that is like it kind of becomes a tornado in a sense. Like it really like puts the physicality into like the spin, because like you start spinning and then you start like attracting things. You're like, oh wait, what about that? That's not right.
Totally.
And then I see it work for you too, doing what Lily was saying about basically just throwing a stick into the spokes and like going for a swim or something. You got to just kind of like get your head above water enough that you can be like, and like pull the parachute for a second.
Physical movement is such a strong part of that. I feel like reminding yourself, okay, I'm here. This is my body. This is my life, rather than just living in my brain.
Totally.
And I do feel like this particular career, of all the ups and downs of being a freelancer, trying to provide for yourself so that your basic needs are met, but also like be creatively fulfilled, it's just a unique set of challenges that can feed that. We've known you or known of you since we moved to town, so like 10 years now.
I remember meeting you guys.
Yeah,
being
a
like,
decade
do y'all
ago.
know each other? Y'all were like, we're married. That was really cute.
It was fresh then too.
Yeah, y'all were like newly married.
Yeah. But I feel like 10 years into this town, it's cool to see a lot of our community and peer group. We've all gone through such different journeys with our careers. And some of us are more intimate with each other, and some of us are just kind of watching from afar. And from afar, I've observed you doing some deep diving, soul looking. And I'm curious if that's accurate and what that's been like for you on your path of evolving through your career trajectory.
We never know what other people are thinking of us, but that is accurate. I feel the same towards y'all. I'm like, it's cool to see the shifts and people evolve and try different things, because it's like, we have to, we're growing up. But yeah, I have done that. And as y'all all know, we went through 2020. That was a really hard year. When I look back in ways, there are things about it personally that did become peaceful for me just due to circumstances. I think for me that a shift happened, but then I was a little disturbed for a while with myself because I just felt like all my beliefs had just gone away. But I had a new situation that I believed in. Like I found my partner and a lot changed like it did for everybody, and had a few years of just needing to learn a bit more about how to be a person in the world and give a damn about things outside of my music career while feeding that too. One thing I did for a while was just feel really pulled back and not want to share anything with anybody. And I had a record come out that I didn't feel like promoting. I toured. I did some interviews and stuff, but I felt just shy about saying anything in an interview or opening up to anybody. And very dark about that for a bit. And now I don't feel like that. But it's taken just some like healing. We all have stuff, and it's a constant life journey for me to work on that stuff. But there were some things that I just needed to face head on about my own crap and just look it in the eye and move through it before I felt like I could get back into a space of feeling good around people, basically. So pulled back for a bit there, 2020 through 2022 were kind of weird is how I see it.
I see that for sure. I mean, we had massive changes, just life happening, being the pandemic and having a kid, and what happened with Michaela's mom and her family situation, and all of that has been a monumental shift. To me, what messed with my head more was actually 2021 instead of 2020. 2020 was to me like so yes, it was shocking, but there was like, it felt much more like everybody was going through this together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everybody's like, wow, this is crazy. Granted, the first like 3 months, people are like, oh, it's just going to be a couple months and we'll be back at it.
I know.
But then like when it got into like 2021 and really things were still not normal, even though people were on the road a little bit more, it was no semblance of normalcy, like attendance at shows or having to get tested before you walk in a venue or being a week away from a tour and be like, is this going to happen? Is somebody going to get COVID and we have to cancel? Like whatever it was, 2021 was the kind of subliminal, subconscious, grueling year for me that really like set me back. You had mentioned there were some things in pulling back for you that were like actually blessings in disguise, peaceful changes, which I see that too. The gold in the struggle for sure.
Yeah, I know y'all have been through so much, and that's really impressive to like come through it with that kind of mindset, because life can get really brutal sometimes. And 2021 was it was a very kind of lonely year, I think. 2020 was too, but it was so shocking. I don't know. I can't sum it up for it, but like, I know exactly what you mean about 2021. It was harrowing in its own way.
In my mind, I wonder how it will look 10 years from now. If you look at it like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and everything in the middle kind of like twisted.
Absolutely.
2020 was like the entering in it. So there was still some remnants, shine, goo left from like 2019 and previous.
Absolutely.
And 2022 was like things were starting to open up again and return to like more normal. 2021 was like the shift.
It's like
year.
people figuring out, how do we come back together in this new way?
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is different.
Absolutely, it is.
It's interesting because, like you said, everyone had different experiences. Like I have a sharp before the pandemic and after the pandemic because of also all the other different stuff that happened in our life. But our lives drastically different before the pandemic, unrecognizable in a lot of ways.
Like how so?
I mean, one, parenthood, bringing a child into the world.
Of course, that, yes.
My mom was a very big part of my life and our life. She was very like physically present. So that loss of her changed me, changed our family dynamic. But then I feel like the reverberating impact was also before that. We were in our early 30s. He was just a touring drummer back then, and he was on his verge of shifting. Now he's a producer and lives and works, not lives.
I mean, pretty much.
Lives and works in this recording studio and makes music for TV, and his priorities are different. His everything is different. And I was very gung-ho about my music career. I was just like, I will do whatever I need to do to try and generate success in my music career. And the pandemic, all the life things that happened, hence this podcast, has really made me do a lot of investigative, like, is this healthy?
Yeah.
Is this actually how I want to spend this one life? How does this impact my brain and my emotional well-being? Am I able to be a good friend? Are my friends good friends? Yeah, like you said, you pulled back and wanted to try and figure out how to give a shit about things other than your music career. And I think that's very real and honest. And I think it's really brave. A lot of us can keep struggling and feel like something's off, but feel like we have to keep going for survival, to keep promoting and making and putting out there. So to pull back takes a lot of courage to be like, you know what? I need to take some time away, which this industry basically tells you is career suicide, to take any time away, to say like, I need to get right with myself. That takes a lot of courage.
That is a cool, sunny way to look at it too, and I hear you, everything you're saying. And I feel like it totally can be done, in that you can have a music career and do your thing, but also be available to be a family person. And that, I mean, I also know that living the life of a troubadour or anybody trying to push their own songs involves sacrifice. And sometimes it doesn't look pretty to other people, and it can be painful because you're like, I'm not trying to be a piece of shit. You have to be focused. Mm-hmm. But that being said, on the other side of that, it's like we get to decide for ourselves. I would like to be a good wife right now and not just be like fixating on my own, and there's no right or wrong. So we have to decide what matters to us and then go from there, and I feel like at this junction, like being 40, That's what's going to feed my songs. If I don't do that, I write the same songs. I have nothing to say if I'm not growing the rest of my life. It is hard because I know how driven both of you guys are, and I am too. But my people around me matter, and I'm not trying to get famous at any cost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I want to do well in my life. We all do. Everybody does.
I'm just curious because you have such a different perspective than like the two of us, for instance. Aaron's parents were carpenter and nurse. My dad is a military man and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. But you grew up with a working professional musician who is seen as very successful. Can you speak a little bit about how that kind of informed your path?
That's really cool. I love hearing about people's families and what parents do, because it's just like, cool, like that's where you come from. And so thank you for telling me about your folks. And I mean, with my dad, like, I guess it gave me the sense of like, this can be done, but also saw the sacrifice involved too. We all know it. We've all toured. The deep elation you can get out there, but also pain of missing somebody so much. I think him a lot. I'm like, he had 3 kids and loves my mom. It couldn't have been easy all the time, but he had to do what he had to do and gave us a really good life through doing that. But he kept it together. My dad's been sober my whole life. He's been really present. So even when he was gone, he was present in a way, I felt always.
Yeah,
so.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was cool. I also, something cool that I saw about that, I think that helped me is he had ups and downs. He had labels be like, we're not working with you anymore. He had to shift management. He had to do a bunch of things. It was never just a straight series of like, thumbs up to this guy. That's how he got where he got. Everybody saying yes. So I knew he fought for it. So that's helped me in terms of like the rejection. I'm just like, well, then you got to try somebody else. If this person doesn't like you because he did that, he did pretty good. So that's about how I feel about that.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to be able to absorb, to fight for it. And, just perseverance,
Yes, totally.
And that it gives you a perspective that like a rejection or multiple rejections is not the deciding factor of your career or your worth. You saw the insight of like, well, he got rejected numerous times, but he got yeses over here, and he wouldn't have had those yeses if he had let those rejections inform what he felt about his path.
Totally.
So I think that's really important because that's hard. Even if we like intellectually tell ourselves that, it's really hard to believe that for ourselves.
It is so hard to believe that. And I feel so empowered talking to my friends like you guys, where it's just like, yeah, we have all felt that way. And I don't look at you that way. If somebody else has said, no, I don't want what you are laying down, that's not how my friends, are looking at me. So I feel a lot of value in the communal conversation about this. We all can't base our self-worth off that. We all know that people are getting plucked off TikTok to get famous, and that doesn't mean they're bad or good or better. It just, that's a different thing, and I got to believe in what I'm doing. And
for me, being seen by my friends and my peers, and especially being in this town where like most of my friends are in this business and do the same thing, it is reassuring. Seeing, no matter how close you are to somebody, you're not going to see like the day-to-day failures.
Absolutely. We're not putting that on Instagram. Like me crying alone. Like,
yeah,
I don't believe
exactly.
myself.
Exactly. Like in your own life, obviously you see every crack, you see every bump. In my experience, that's like really fertile ground for a shame spiral. Why me? Why is it like this? Like, why is it so hard? And so being seen by friends that know failure and them just being like, I feel that too. I have that same experience. I've had this, is just like fulfilling and really kind of reinforcing.
Totally.
Cool. This is normal.
We judge ourselves so much more harshly than anybody out there is probably judging us or even thinking about us. And I have to remind myself that I know so many friends who I think are incredibly talented musicians and great songwriters and have been through the whole industry gamut and have had record deals and been dropped and big agents and been dropped and whatever. And I've never thought, wow, they suck. I've never thought that.
Right, exactly. You're never like, I see why. You're like, you're kidding me. You're so
and
good.
That's what, like, again, why we started this. I just had a friend text me the other day that she had coffee with another friend who was going through some troubles with the label distribution thing. And she was like, go listen to the other 22 Hours episodes with Aaron Shafer-Haiss and Andrew Combs, because those dudes are fucking great. And they
are great.
Challenges with industry stuff too, because that's what this game is. And I've been kind of rethinking my whole approach to how I want to put out music. And I actually just got out of my record deal intentionally. And I had all these mixed feelings about it. Like, am I crazy? And then I was like, who are some of my friends who I admire and respect so much and who have just intentionally been independent all the way? I'm calling them. I call like Maya DeVitri, Joe Pug, and like that community and that reinforcement and the generosity of, hell yes, you can do this. And this is why this is empowering, and sharing of information. And like, this is my experience with this. That is what we have to keep focusing on whenever we put our stock in what label is giving us attention, what our numbers are, whatever. It's like the beauty of our community that we build together. And that we're not actually judging each other, even though sometimes we think we really are.
Right, exactly. That's the thing I try to explain about Nashville. Sometimes people are like, oh, I hear it's really competitive there. And I'm like, it is, but like in a really cool way. Like, I guess everybody's take is different. I don't even see it so much as competitive. I more see it makes me competitive with myself to be here. Because I'm like, everybody's good. I better stay good. Not even that I think I'm good. I better keep up on my game and get better, you know, because there are a lot of people that want to see other people do well here. Because that means if you can do well, maybe I can do well. We can all do well. And you just root for people. You know?
I've also been really loving this age. We're 38. I feel like it's so different than when we were 28, where there was so much frenetic energy in all of us of what do I got to do to try and like solidify my path as a musician. And I think this age, everyone's been through it enough and been like, things look different than I maybe hoped they would look. But there's like a learning and a deepening of what life is about that brings a little bit of knowledge and wisdom they can bring to these conversations, and like serenity.
That's a good word. Serenity is a big one. I totally know what you mean. And, you know, I have friends, and I'm sure y'all do too. It's like I have friends all ages. I have some really good friends in their late 20s. I have some friends that are just young as hell. They're like 22 and they're so sweet and cool. And the late 20s are a pivotal point in life, I feel. And I remember them well. And I admire that kind of time period. And that being said, I'm so glad to be in this time period as well. It is, like you said, there's some sort of peace that's come. I'm still chaotic AF in my own way. But for all the kind of insecurity that's come with aging for me, on the flip side come a weird confidence where I'm like, well, there's an acceptance that helps me not be complacent, but just be like peaceful and be like, okay, you're going to have to kind of see things clear for what they are. Dream your dreams, go for them, keep your feet on the ground. Do y'all feel that? You're 38. That's a cool time. I left being 38.
Yeah.
As a 40-year-old, I'll say.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, way back then.
I'm like, when I was 38. Cool, though.
No, I hear what you're saying. And my experience is more like I have seen enough different situations, enough like curveballs, enough things that I'm like, this is it. It's happening, you know, here's the finish line. It's going to be smooth after this. And then it's not, you know, then the road
and you're
just
like,
ends.
oh, right.
How many of us were like, 2020 is our year?
Oh, yeah.
So many of us.
That was Michaela at 6 a.m. on New Year's Day on 2020. You're like, this is it. We're at somebody else's house, most of which are asleep. I'm like, dude, we got to go.
Yeah. I was partying hard bringing in 2020, feeling like this was the year.
You just didn't know what that meant yet.
But that's exactly it. It's a lot of that. I had my hopes. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And then like just soul crushing defeat, I guess failure I'll put in bunny ears, because like I used to be really afraid of failure, which would like hold me back. And now I love it because inevitably I learn. maybe 2020 was our year, and 10 years from now we'll look back and be like, that kind of saved me. That like mentality change in this conversation, like the phrase that has been ringing over and over in my head that I've heard us all allude to is quality over quantity.
Quality is a big deal.
Spending our time more nicely.
This is blowing my mind. I'm like, 2020 was my year.
Yeah, see?
Well, I thought 2020 was like, I was going to be touring nonstop. I had a big booking agent. I had European agent, had all these tours and festivals booked the whole year. And instead, I spent the whole year in my house. But like, I think back on the first part of the pandemic and I was like, that was such a beautiful time. It was the first time I was home that long. And it was the first time I like saw things bloom in the spring. And it was the first time I just went to the lake regularly. It's the first time I learned how to mountain bike. And we went on this epic trip. I felt like we became like best friends in that time. I got pregnant. There's all this beauty and depth that completely changed me. And it's just not in the way that I thought it was going to be. Yeah. And maybe if it had gone the way I thought, where I was touring nonstop, I would have become a maniac and we would have gotten divorced.
That is so great that you're able to see that. I think back to that too. And I'm like, I've been a nice person most of my life. I've had my shitty parts, but like overall, but I kind of look back to me pre-2020 and I'm like, I kind of sucked. I was all about love my family and friends, but I really just couldn't see outside of tunnel vision my stuff. And I still kind of have that side of me because we have to drive our thing. You know, I look back to 2020 and I'm like, a lot of shifts occurred. What I wanted didn't happen, but it led me to my husband and we live in a house together now. It led me to my dog. All this love came into my life that I hadn't really had time to nurture had it gone the way I wanted.
Yeah.
So I feel ya.
As much as it sucks to live through those moments. And I'm talking things that like maybe aren't as large as like a massive pandemic that ends the industry that you are using for your sustenance. But like whatever that might be, like maybe you get dropped by somebody on your team that you think is going to be the savior, or you love your guitar player and your guitar player leaves your band for a bigger gig or whatever. Yeah, you're like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And maybe the guitar player like sings harmonies too. So you're like, great. I don't have somebody to sing with and I don't have a lead guitar player. Like, what am I going to do? And then you find somebody that not only completely fills the role, but is so inspiring and it changes, you know, the music that you create and like all of that. Being able to understand in the moment and have the experience, having lived through many of these moments, to know that like, yeah, this failure sucks, but it's going to pass. And there will be gold on the other side that comes from this that I didn't see. I had a person, I guess it was like early 2018. Some guy from Smyrna came and was fixing our HVAC. He saw my wedding ring and he was talking. He's like, me and my wife have been together for 60 years. And he was talking about that. And he's like, it's a good thing they make it out of metal because you got to melt metal down to like form it and all of that. And he's like, you know, nothing becomes strong without going through the fire. Basically, I'm paraphrasing what he said. And I was like,
you're like,
oh. He's like, you know, you need to have fire. You need to like break it all down and melt everything down to make it strong and resilient and beautiful.
I love that.
Who
HVAC
are you, Mr.
guy.
HVAC man?
That's beautiful. And that's the beauty of being around people too. They just say things that you're like, that's going to stick with me my whole life. Thanks. And you never know where it's going to come from. And this is a little like that, but just to speak to like when the things happen and it's like, what am I going to do? And it's like, you just pick yourself up and do something else, you know? And I think about that a lot as well, because it's easy to get stuck in that feeling of like, this is the end. I'm screwed. It's like this now. It's never like that. You have control over the next move.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of hearing things that kind of stick with you, we all know that like what we do, trying to sustain our lives through making art is hard. You start hearing that when you're really little, even if your parents aren't in the industry.
Absolutely.
I heard somebody say, it was in relation to something completely different, but it was like this group of people that were struggling with something. They basically had an authority figure be like, this is what hard looks like. You knew this was going to be hard, and this is what hard looks like. And so just like reminding myself in those times, I know this is going to be hard. Cool. This is what it looks like. Yeah. I can handle it. In a way, it's like pumping myself up, but then also like being very gentle with myself and giving myself permission to be like, this sucks, because it does suck.
Sometimes you have to feel that.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you've been on our list for a long time, and then what reminded me to reach out is because I was on Instagram and I saw you post on your stories about Instagrams. It's like a video game of unlock your next goal. You got so many views on your reel or whatever. And you posted it and said, this is why I deleted my account after I got up to like over 20,000 followers because the pressure to sustain and grow was too much. And you said that you deleted it to see also if you could sustain a career. And like, so far you have. Can you talk a little bit about that decision? Because I feel like so many people feel like we live and die by our social numbers.
I bet you there's more than a few people listening to this episode that just had a panic attack when we said that you deleted your account. They're like, wait, how? Why? Why'd you do that? No.
I know. And I would say to anyone thinking about deleting their whole thing they have acquired, I'm like, don't, just suspend it. But that being said, I just have to be all or none with the way I do stuff. So, and I was so in my head about Instagram stuff. And honestly, it was almost more personal than professional, the things I was in my head about. But I was like, I'm tired of this. You know, like I've based a lot of my worth off of this. I don't know if it's real or not. And so I deleted it. And then for a year, I didn't have it. And then my cousin helped me start one again. And I was hesitant about dipping back into the world of it. And lately, I've been having fun with it because I do feel like that time off. I'm like a very obsessive person. I'm also an addictive person. I feel those things are clearly rigged to tap into any addictive sort of OCD thing you have. And I don't feel even a victim of that. I just needed to establish for myself that I could have a boundary of it, see what life was like off it. It was really cool and clear. I did some touring in that time that went well, but it was also hard to promote things, you know? And I did get to the point where it was like, nobody knows what I'm doing because I was using my Facebook a lot, which has its own thing going on. So I wasn't like off all social media. I didn't feel like I saw a decline in shows, but that was before I did my own tour. Like I was doing opening stuff. So there were other people promoting the stuff I was doing. I've seen what Instagram looks like and what a room looks like full. And I'm like, there are bands on there that sell out tours that have not a crazy Instagram following. But I've seen it. We all have probably. So it's like, this isn't real. Like if you only got however many likes, don't think that's how the world is. It's how the online world is. They're two different things. But I don't know. How do y'all feel about that stuff?
I mean, fully that. You know, you see people that have low numbers on social media and make a great living and sell records and all of that. And then you see people have like a massive following that can't sell small rooms. We think of virtual reality and we think like crazy looking goggles and all of that. And it's immersive. And I'm like, no, like social media is virtual reality. It is this reality that doesn't exist in a tangible place. It only exists virtually.
Totally. It's not a real space. I mean, I think it's a nice tool to help people and obviously like, you know, if you blow up, your numbers are probably going to blow up, but it's also like, I'm not the one to check my stream numbers. I don't do that. Know why? Because it makes me feel bad. So I just kind of let it, I don't know what that means, but I do know when I tour, I like to have more people come each tour. That's how it's gone.
I struggle 100% with Instagram, but no other platform. I'm not on Twitter really anymore. Like Instagram though, is a challenge for me mentally. I've
been relating Michaela's Instagram addiction to like an alcohol addiction lately, only because you've been talking about it. So this is not unprompted here for those that are worried out there. So she'll like delete it from her phone, but then like scroll on the browser.
Oh yeah.
You know,
I do that kind of stuff.
My favorite one is she'll delete Instagram and then she's scrolling like Nextdoor, which is like the craziest social media.
I just need to scroll something.
I'm like, man, when you delete Instagram, you scroll Nextdoor. That's the equivalent of like quitting alcohol and going to the store and buying like rubbing alcohol and being like, this could probably work, right?
It's super addictive, you know?
So addictive.
It's so addictive.
And the problem is that we think it's our own personal weakness that it's addictive.
Yeah.
Even though, again, we intellectually understand it was designed to be addictive.
For sure.
My brother got off all social media, or maybe he's like still on Twitter or something, but he doesn't need social media for his career. That's the challenge with being a musician is like, I do songwriting coaching. I promote my work and my lessons and my coaching all through Instagram. My ability to like survive financially is directly impacted by that. And I'm so grateful for that tool, but it is very tricky mentally to try and keep your worth detached from it and not be like, man, I've been doing this a long time. Maybe if I was better at it, I'd have more followers. Do people just not like me? It's so fucked what happens in our brains.
Totally.
My brother was just like, I was addicted to just scrolling mindlessly. And then I watched a 60-minute special, basically how like these apps are designed to have the same type of influence that slot machines do. And I just deleted them. I was like, this is not good for me. And he got off of it.
That's some strong willpower of your brother just to be like, I watch a special and then made this decision. It's like, dang, dude. But also like, that's really cool. And on one hand, it can be really fun. And I'm trying to just have fun myself with it. I'm like, I have stuff to promote. I'm going to need this. But also like right now, I've deleted my app and I'm like, I will not be checking it till 7 p.m. But I do that all the time. And then I upload it again at like 2, and then I delete it. I like do it 5 times. I try to establish the boundaries with it because speaking of what your brother said, something I realized when I was off of it, I was like, I care about what other people think. I want to know. But I also felt really true to my own convictions. I kind of appreciated that. Like my husband would tell me stuff everybody be talking about online. And I was like being a little removed from it. Just the herd mentality of this is cool to be this or this is cool to be this. And it's like, I don't like that. I want to think for myself. And 2020 really burned me out on that. And I don't mean even politically left or right. I just mean I said my opinions too. I'm not trying to put anyone down. It really started messing my head up where I was like, what do I feel? What do I think about this horrifying crap that goes on in our world? I want to think for myself.
It's also just scientifically like so many articles out there of just our brains are not wired to consume and hold this much information constantly.
Absolutely.
We had Laura Veers on here and she said, I got to a point where I was like, we are what we consume and like our thoughts are what we consume. And she was like, so I got off Instagram and she was like, because I was literally checking it 1,000,000 times a second. And she was like, so now my managers do it because I need it. I tell them what to post. I don't have access to it. And I was like, that is some strong will.
That is some strong will for sure. And you got to do what you got to do. You have to have some strong ass skin in the world today, to get by and stay true to who you are, I think. I really admire people that are forward with how they feel and what they think and to each their own. I feel you. We all have to protect our own inner knowing one way or another.
Yeah, I think the protecting the inner knowing, like you said, when you step back from social media and saw this kind of crowd mentality, I also stepped back. Man, it must have been 2018.
You were off like a year, right?
I'd like log on like once every like 3 months or so. I noticed that same thing. Just the space that created. I was also started sobriety at that time. And so like this came with all of that going on, like this space that all created allowed me to hear my inner knowing a little bit more. I didn't even know that my inner anything was there or saying anything. And so like creating that space is like, oh, well, whatever's going on in here knows a thing or two.
That's such a good thing to look at. I feel like for anybody, like all of us as an adult, it's however you want to look at something, if you have any sort of relationship with something that you're like, I'm not really into the way this is going right now. Recalibrating is huge,
Yeah.
And whether it's social media, alcohol, I've never been one to be like, this is the one way to do it. But it takes guts to face that stuff and be like, I'd like to change this, in the way I go about it, whatever that means. And I know what you mean about the quiet. I left my phone in the airport and I didn't have one for 4 days because they mailed it back. I was in heaven. I was like, woohoo! I could get messages on my computer. So I wasn't like estranged from anything. But when I went anywhere, I was like, I'm free to just be like totally here. And then I thought about it. I was like, it's crazy in our society that we are expected to carry on like 40 conversations a day. You don't have to. Like, I love chatting and being there. And I have a big family and I love talking to them. And y'all have a child, so I'm sure you have to be like on, and available. Yeah. But it's cool to take the space if you can in any way.
I've shared this before. And for a while, I was touring with this band, and it was basically like a string band trio, and they'd have a rotating cast of drummers that would tour with them. And I was honored to be one of those for a while. And one of the songwriters every now and then would take a day of silence, wouldn't talk, wouldn't look at her phone or anything, just a day. And then we'll like come back, and I loved it. The two others that were like full-time members were like, okay, here we go. But I was like, there was one day in particular, and I say this with 100% love and admiration for her doing it. I think we had to drive from San Francisco to LA and return a car and then fly to Houston or Dallas and rent a car and then drive to, it must have been Houston, and then we drove to Kerrville or something like that. And that was the day that decided she wanted to do it silently.
Wow. I'm going to try that.
And she did that like through LAX, through like renting cars. I think either the one we were returning or the one that we were picking, I think it was the one that we were picking up, was in her name.
I need to know how she did that.
Because this was at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks into a tour, and we had a week left. The next day she woke up and she was like totally rejuvenated.
There's so much pressure to be like connected and in the mix. Like I noticed that all the time. Like we went to visit my parents last week or a week or two ago, and they live in Michigan. And obviously because my mom's stroke, life is very slow and like there's not a lot of activity going on. And like we just bike around town all the time and go to playgrounds and get ice cream. And there was like a big part of me that was like, what if we moved here? And then like a part of me was like, if we did that, I would be giving up. I would be dropping out and giving up. And then I was like, but then there's also a big part of me that was like, oh, I could relax.
Oh,
but that pull that's not okay is so deep still. Of you got to be in the mix. My entire adult life has only been New York City or Nashville.
Ooh, those are two happening spots. Yeah. And it's like, totally. I have a fantasy every time I go to a small, quiet town. Half of me and my heart is pulled. I'm like, I want this. It's like the No Doubt song, Simple Kind of Life. It's like, I want that. Those are things that make me happy. It's really quiet, simple situations. But then there's that other half of me that's, I feed off the mix and I need it too. And even just moving out to Goodlettsville has been like a quieter change of pace. Where my family lived growing up, we lived in the country, but we were always going into town, So it's like, yeah, I feel you. I need both, but there's part of me that like would love to just go do something quieter. I'm literally like mortified getting on stage. There's another half that's, I love this. And I guess a lot of us feel that way.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think our dream place is just having like 10 acres of quiet woods with maybe a stream in the middle of Brooklyn.
Yeah,
that's all
exactly.
Totally.
That is literally my dream. I want to be able to like be in my paradise, but then bike out of my yard and be like at a coffee shop and bookstore and
world-renowned museum.
Did you go to NYU?
We both went to the New School, which is like
up the street from
10
NYU.
blocks up the street from NYU.
That sounds like a blast to go to school, like college in New York City.
Yeah, there's part of me that wonders what like going to a college with a campus would be like.
Yeah, because we all like lived in, I mean, we had dorms the first year or two, but then a lot of people just moved out to apartments to different boroughs. And like, it just kind of felt like we were adults commuting into work to go to class.
Fast track to adulthood there, yeah.
For sure.
Like,
I like to say that like, we went to college and going to college like right in the middle of Manhattan, and then graduating and having to like figure out how to pay rent. We went from like college age to like immediately like 30. So we were like 30, 31, 32, 33, however many 8 years after college that we lived in New York. And then we moved to Nashville and moved to like...
We reverted.
Moved like near the air park in East Nashville. And like, the 5 spot was like heyday of the 5 spot. And so we moved to Nashville and it was like, we were both immediately 25. Weird chronology. College to our 30s to like our 20s.
Yeah.
And now we're
fucked
here.
Off for a while. And then we were like, we should maybe get our lives together.
That period in your life, it's possible where you're like, I'm kind of just having a lot of fun right now. Like,
It was that.
That's cool to know about you guys. And sounds like a fun, interesting, not just straightforward path, which is cool. I was going to say I went to college in Denver, which was super fun. And I had a blast, but I remember the hard line of I moved here with my band right into like, I worked at Bread and Company on West End and was starting to pay rent, which wasn't a lot at the time where I lived. It was like literally I paid about $250 for my rent to live like right downtown. But
Crazy.
I remember just the complete shift of I was just a college kid living in and I worked and stuff in college, but I was also going to school to like serving Vandy kids and being on the other side and being like, oh man, this kind of sucks, But like, that was also the beginning of my like got to do what you got to do, like,
Yeah.
because I was just like, I'm their age and I was just having fun like that. But now I'm waking up at 4:30 in the morning to cook them breakfast.
Yeah.
We had a conversation with Sarah Watkins and Sean Watkins.
They're cool.
Yeah, they're great people. And both of them in different points of the conversation shared gratitude for the skills that you just passively develop through having to take care of things, whether you're running your own tour, booking your own tour, having to do all that, or doing whatever you need to do to pay your bills so that you can keep writing music and putting it out. There's so many skills that you develop in that grind that are so useful.
You are so right. You do kind of have to become like a Renaissance person. I do light clerical work. I can kind of work with Google Sheets.
I can be a travel agent. I can do graphic design.
All of that. And the skills of being a self-starter. Identifying what needs to be done and holding yourself accountable to it is a massive skill that the more I talk to people that employ other people, the more they're like, that skill is rare. We have to like spell it out for people, like do this and then do this and then do this.
So as hard as it is, we are blessed to chosen this path.
Yes, it's true. We are. We can do a lot of little different things.
For lots of little pennies.
Totally. Just doing our best.
We'll talk about being blessed. We're honored that you took time to be here with us today and chat with us and share so much.
Likewise, y'all. It's been really fun to talk to both of you guys and get to know y'all a little better through this. So thank you. I am honored.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Hey, real quick before we wrap up today's episode, it takes a lot to produce even a small show like ours, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider taking a minute to check out our Patreon. There's a lot happening over there, all with the intent of growing our community and offering you more resources to navigate a career based on your art more sustainably. You can learn more at the link in the show notes below. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll catch you next time on the Other 22 Hours podcast.